The Reverend Dr. David Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was heartened to hear the Minister speak of the failures of the system in an honest way in the committee stages, and heartened also to hear her speak about the certainty that an emissions trading scheme should provide for business. That was something that the Minister spoke about, and it showed an understanding of what needs to happen next. We on this side, as my colleague Megan Woods has already said, want to see more action, and we want to see it soon. We want to see more than this timid step, which is a U-turn on a policy that the government put in place some years ago when they came into government and gutted the previous emissions trading scheme, which did give already certainty to business. So to hear that they are back on that track is heartening. But with my colleague Megan Woods, I want to reiterate the concern that things are sped up, that the action and the plan is put in place. We've called for a long time for the removal of this 2-for-1 provision. The Labour Party has called for this action to happen that is happening in the House tonight for years, and now it is happening. We support it. We support it, but we want to see more. We've called for other things which would be sensible steps, like putting in place an independent climate commission that sets up a carbon budgeting process so that we can actually achieve significant emissions reductions targets, so that we can have targets and then a plan to meet those targets. It is not rocket science, Mr. Speaker. It is the logical thing to do if you believe the things you are saying in this House. If the government believes the things it is saying in this House, it needs to put a plan of action in place, because we know that New Zealand has per capita emissions that are the 5th highest out of 40 developed nations when they were measured in 2012. And if New Zealand can't do this, who on earth can? Our electricity sector has the potential to be completely renewable. The last Labour government put in place a ban on new generation being from fossil fuels because we knew that that was quite possible to do. The last Labour government put in place a biofuels sales obligation because we knew that would cost no extra, but it would give an emerging biofuels industry certainty. And we put in place the first all sectors, all gases emissions trading scheme in the world because we knew that would be good for New Zealand business long term. We knew that the small extra cost, the few cents extra on a block of butter would be well worth it in marketing that butter as a premium product from a world-leading country that actually cares about its environment. Instead, we've had 8 lost years. 8 lost years, Mr. Speaker. 8 lost years until the government has finally agreed that giving business some kind of pathway and certainty is the answer, that actually having some meaningful action in this space is a good idea, and yet it's not really certain yet. We've heard the Minister tonight say there needs to be more, with no plan, no indication of what that is. How can business plan in an environment when things change from year to year? They claim to be a business-friendly government, but they change their plans all the time. And it is very hard for any sensible business to plan in that kind of environment. What they can go off, and unfortunately what they have been going off, is the kind of tacit nudge that they're not really that serious about it. And we're reaping the consequences of that as our emissions rise and rise year after year, as foresters choose not to plant because there are disincentives in place, as people choose to burn fossil fuels because there is a guarantee that there will be no cost above $25 per unit. This situation we find ourselves in is one of the government's making. We commend them for taking a small step in the right direction, but the problem that we find in front of us is one the government could have addressed long ago. They could have outlined a more bold plan. They could have outlined a plan that was in line with the aspirations of ordinary middle New Zealand. Those people out there battling every day who would like to see a little increase in their take-home pay, that would like to see their education of a world standard instead of dropping, those people that would like to get to hospital and know they didn't have to pull out a chequebook. All of those things, of course, in this budget we've seen deteriorate. We've seen a government that doesn't have priorities aligned with middle New Zealand, and that is, unfortunately, where this government sits. It seems content to manage New Zealand's decline. We've heard them talk about paying off debt, Mr. Speaker. It's a government that's borrowed more than Muldoon. And here, in the space of climate change, we know that they are borrowing from future generations. It's a pattern under this government. Borrow and hope. Borrow and hope. They've done it with our money. They've borrowed more than Muldoon. Here they're doing it with our future by borrowing emissions that don't allow for such a gentle transition in the future, because it is getting more and more urgent. And Mr. Speaker, there is no excuse for it. The facts are clear. The latest IPCC report says that without additional mitigation, we're now facing average global temperature rises of 3.7 to 4.9 degrees Celsius, Mr. Speaker. That report is compared to pre-industrial levels by the end of this century. Mr. Speaker, we know what the issue is. We must have targets that are more ambitious, at least in line with the EU and its overall target of a 40% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030. We know there's space for ambition. We know there's space to expand New Zealand's brand as a clean, green country if we just do the right thing. It's not hard. If we just do the right thing, it will be good for our businesses as they spy the opportunity in becoming high-tech, clean and future-oriented. If we make polluters pay rather than bearing the costs on every other citizen, if we do what's right, Mr. Speaker, it leads to a more prosperous future for our country. And we hope that the government, after taking this first tepid step forward, will look more closely at this picture. I take some hope out of what the Minister said, that she intends to do that, and I only hope that those words will be followed with action.